Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of JAX Career Chats. My name is Christina Valianatos. I'm a genomics educator in the Division of Education, Genomic Education at the Jackson Laboratory. And we have with us today Zoe Brown. She's a research assistant at the Center for Biometric Analysis at JAX, but specifically in the Neurobehavioral Phenotyping Division. She helps to advance human disease research through mouse studies, and she does a lot of the behavioral testing on mice. So we're really excited to have you today, Zoe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Or, well, virtually.
Virtually, yes, yes. Can you tell us a little bit about this Center for Biometric Analysis and specifically the types of things that you do in your job in the Neurobehavioral Phenotyping Division?
Yeah. So the CBA is kind of like a big umbrella for a couple different cores, but basically the CBA works for JAX, whereas we don't have to rely on grants or funding to keep our jobs. The JAX is always going to have us here because we work for all of the research labs on the campus. My course specifically, we run behavioral phenotyping tests. So research labs will send us mice with different genetic models or different drug treatments. And we basically run them through whatever tests they want us to and report back to them basically how the mouse reacts to different tests that we run.
So who are the types of people or labs that are sending you mice to test, to do these types of tests?
I think we've gotten mice from pretty much every lab, but there's a lot of model AD mice that we work with.
What's that? Is that Alzheimer's disease?
Yep, it's an Alzheimer's model that we have. There's some mice that are Parkinson's models, different types. It's like mostly Alzheimer's. There's a lot of aging studies that we do, and those kind of require, we test the mice when they're young, and then they'll come back to us when they're a lot older, and we'll test them again. And kind of the fun part about it is that we're blinded to the information while we're running the tests, so that we're not biased in any way if we're expecting a mouse to do poorly. So we stay blinded to all of the differences between the mice. And then when we do the data and send it back to the labs that we're working for, we unblind it and we can graph everything and make it all nice and neat when we send it. But it's really interesting then being able to see the clear differences in the tests that you're running. And then way later, when you read about the studies, the big studies where the work we did was involved, is really cool.
That's awesome. So you have labs that send you their mice and you perform these tests. And then later on, you get to see like the publications of the research results and know that it was your work that contributed to that lab's research findings, right?
Yes. And sometimes like in a very small way, but it's still very cool.
So what are some of the types of tests you run? So you talked about their different model mice like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. What are you looking for? What are these tests that you're running?
So we do quite a few tests. One of the most common ones is open field, which is pretty basic. You put the mouse into kind of a chamber that's well lit, bright, because mice don't really like open, bright spaces. So it's kind of seeing what the mouse's anxiety is like. In a way, you can see like, does it explore a lot? Does it stay close to the walls? You can gather a lot of information from just how a mouse reacts to an open space. But we also do rotarod, which is like a spinning rod that the mouse walks on, just to see like how well its like mobility is. Let's see, we do grip, and that's kind of similar. And that's one that, say if we had like a Parkinson's model, it would be interesting to see like, at what age point does it start to lose its grip, or if you're looking at different treatments, different drugs, like which mice perform better on rotarod or grip, stuff like that. We did one that was touchscreen, and that was the mice literally learning on a touchscreen if shapes popped up, and it would go touch it with its nose. If it did it correctly, it would get sugar water. So like, how well could the mouse learn? So stuff like that. Physical and kind of like testing the mouse's like cognitive function.
Yeah, cognition, learning, memory,
Yeah.
anxiety, those types of things, in addition to the physical ones, like you mentioned, strength and gait.
Yeah, so really we can gather a lot. And usually when people send us their mice, we'll do, a whole like line of testing with those mice to just gather as much information as possible.
And so this might be a silly question, but you're working with the mice themselves. So like you're handling the mice, you're running the tests with the little mice.
Yeah, we are. And it's cool. Some days less cool than others, but we're working with mice that are more wild than the typical Black 6 lab mouse that JAX is famous for, which is really cool because wild mice give us a better sense of genes from outside of mice bred in a lab. Their genes are more representative of the wild because they're wild mice. But those mice are really crazy, so they're kind of hard to work with. They're
more difficult to handle, huh? Yeah, I can attest to that too. I've also worked with some more wild strains versus the laboratory inbred mouse strains, and they're very much more active and difficult to handle.
Definitely. Now when I work with just a regular lab mouse, I'm like, oh, you're so sweet.
So do you need some special type of training to handle the mice and work with the mice and do these types of tests?
Yes. We have to, basically your first pretty much month of working here is training. For my job specifically, I know that you don't have to have any prior experience with mice. I did, because in college I worked in a research lab that worked with mice. But even then I still had to go through it's all the same training. But we do a training with like one-on-one with the vets at JAX, and you basically have to perform a bunch of things correctly a number of times in front of the vet for them to like approve you before you can even touch a mouse. So you have to complete all of that training before you can handle any of the mice.
Was there any other sort of like training or certificate or qualifications to have your job? Or you came in with a bachelor's and that was sufficient?
Yeah, I came in, I think they look for research experience and biology, neuroscience background for sure. But I do work with some people who have worked starting in mouse rooms and have just worked their way up, which is another valid way to do it. But yeah, I think working in a research lab specifically with mice beforehand sets you up very well for this.
So you mentioned like some of your other colleagues. Can you tell us a little bit about who else you work with aside from the mice? Who are your colleagues at work, and who are the people that you interact with kind of on a daily basis?
Yeah, sometimes it does feel like it's just mice. But so I work with my group is kind of small. There's 5 of us. One of my coworkers just had a baby, so she's been on maternity leave for a while. But we're like a small group, which is pretty nice. And we do a lot of work together, as well as when we're working alone and testing. But also the RAF workers who work with our mice, like changing boxes for us, and the vets who come in and they give treatments to the mice, and do general, welfare checks. We work with them so often that I would consider those people my coworkers as well, because they're totally necessary to the operation.
Do you have any interface with the clients that you work with? So you were talking about not only do you do the tests, but you also do like the data analysis. So you prepare all of the data for the labs that work with you. Do you interface with those labs aside from preparing the data?
Personally, no. My manager does. She does all of the meet and greets with those people. And at this point, she's worked here so long that she knows all of the different PIs really well. But we do have our CBA meetings, our lab meetings for the whole CBA. And usually at those, we have a PI come and talk for about an hour, 2 hours, about their research that they're either in progress or have finished. And those are projects that we've been working on. So, and then we can ask questions and we can see what the research is.
Yeah,
so that's kind of my
only to learn about the research and the mice that you're working on from the researchers themselves.
Yes, it's very cool.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got to this job? So like what attracted you to JAX with this position? Did you always know you wanted to do behavioral work in mice? How did you get from where you were before to here now?
Yeah, no, I didn't always think I wanted to do this. I went into college thinking I wasn't really into sciences, and I was thinking kind of that I wanted to do like social work, which I think that's like a lot of people's college experience, was you like change your mind a million times. And I worked as a behavioral health professional, kind of as trying to get better at working one-on-one with people. But I really did not like that. So, and luckily I did that really early on. So I realized that I did not want to do social work. And so since that was my part-time job, was being a BHP, and I really was miserable. I was like looking for a job, and I started working for the biology department at UMaine, which is where I went. And I basically was just a lab technician. I would set up for the labs, and I would make sure all of the instruments and microscopes and everything was set up. And I would make the agar plates. Basically, it's just like getting stuff ready for labs. It was like pretty boring, but it made me feel more comfortable, I think, in the science atmosphere. I don't really know how to say that in a less weird way.
Yeah, it kind of like makes you more comfortable with just like the science lingo, the science environment, biology in general. I can see that. I think a lot of students in college try to get any sort of like lab type jobs, and a common starter jobs are these like, setting up for lab courses. I certainly had that type of job when I was in college. or sometimes like working in someone's laboratory, but maybe like as a dishwasher or something like that. So it just kind of makes you feel like comfortable in the environment. You see the setup. It's just kind of your introduction to that world.
Yeah, because science is like a little intimidating, or for me, it felt that way. Like there are a lot of like instruments and a lot of things that you like don't know the name of, and lots of big words. So I think that did help me a little bit. And then I was taking an endocrinology class that I thought was super, super interesting. So I kind of talked to the professor and ended up working for him while I was working as the lab technician for the biology department. And that was the mouse lab that I worked in. So I think at that point, I decided that I enjoyed doing research. And then, yeah, when I graduated, I was kind of looking for a research assistant job anywhere, but specifically JAX, because JAX is definitely a good name to have behind you, especially as like your first job. So yeah, that was kind of my little path. But it's funny because my coworker, Megan, she kind of had like the same path as me when she was figuring out what she wanted to do. And she also worked as a BHP. And we joke about how, because we both really were not happy when we were doing that. And we say like, I would take getting bit by a mouse over being bit by a kid literally any day. Like, this is much better.
I'm sure, no offense to the health workers, the behavioral health workers.
Yeah.
But I think that's a theme that we've seen here on the different career chats that we've been doing. It sounds like even you and your experience with your colleague, that people don't always have a straightforward path, right? So you were even not in science and just had that kind of, the idea, I'm assuming for the behavioral health professional, like wanting to help people and, being interested in behavior and emotions and those types of things. So like kind of a similar desires, but maybe not articulated as science per se, or at least biology.
Definitely.
But then finding those common themes in the biology and still having a more fulfilling career path. That's what we've been hearing.
Yeah, definitely. Because I do think about that sometimes, that the reason I was so interested in being a BHP was kind of like hands-on and feeling, I guess, like I'm working towards something. But
it sounds like
it's just finding that.
Yeah, exactly what you're doing now, right? Like hands-on with the mice, you're doing the data analysis. Even though that's like the mice come from another lab or someone else's research, you still have a very instrumental role in shaping how that research is done and the findings. So it sounds like you're getting using a lot of the same skills and getting a lot of the same rewards that you were looking for.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I think a lot of people will enjoy hearing your experiences and be able to learn from it as well.
Thanks.
Do you have any sort of kind of looking back, any advice for your younger self, especially since, you weren't necessarily in science in the beginning? Do you wish that you had been in science to begin with or in biology, or, do you think that kind of winding career path has helped you?
Yeah, I don't want to say that I wish I got into science earlier, because I don't want to scare anyone away from deciding to change paths and do something that they feel like, oh, maybe I waited too long and I don't know enough. But I do wish that, I guess, I had been more confident, because when I was a kid, I really loved science, and I was really curious about a lot of things. But then when I was in high school, and I wasn't a bad student by any means, but once grades got involved, it kind of added this, like, I felt stupid kind of aspect to it.
Yeah,
So I just kind of,
that's a real concern. Yeah.
yeah. So I went into college kind of being like, I don't really want to do many science classes, but yeah, I just wish I hadn't shied away from it like that. And that's something that I'm definitely still working on. I think there's definitely, when you're in a room with a bunch of really smart people, it's easy to feel like you shouldn't speak, like you have nothing worth saying. But yeah, I don't know. You shouldn't feel that way. It's like advice that I want to give someone that I should follow myself.
Yeah.
I feel intimidated by the people I work with all the time. But I also know that I'm, just as qualified. And I know just as much as, my coworkers.
It's very relatable advice. I'm sure a lot of us can, identify with what you're saying. But it sounds like your job now has helped a lot. It's given you that boost of confidence that, brought you to the science table, the biology table, that you definitely have a seat. You are able to do the experiments and the data analysis just like anyone else. And it kind of helped to show you that, yeah, you belong here and you can definitely do this work.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I definitely, I'm hoping to go to grad school once I, put in my time here. And I know a lot of people who they graduate and then they go right into grad school. And a lot of my professors were telling me not to take a break between schooling and to just kind of get it done all at once. But I'm really glad that I did this because, like you said, I'm just kind of honing in on my skills. I'm getting experience hands-on working, which is really awesome. And I'm, becoming more confident with my ability to analyze data, talk about findings, which I think is really valuable and it will help me immensely when I decide to go to grad school.
Yeah, you always hear those two camps, like, should I go to grad school right away so you don't lose momentum? But then people say no, you should wait, gain experience and, work a little bit. So it's nice to hear your perspective and that taking this time off it's not really time off, right? I mean, it's time away from school, but it's, gaining valuable experience, especially sticking in the sciences. You're learning a lot of the skills that you would need later on with a higher degree if that's how you go.
Yeah.
So it sounds really useful.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there a reason why you want to go to grad school? What are your next step plans? What do you want to do?
I am interested in, I'm still at the phase where I'm deciding what I want to do.
Yeah.
But I think I'm interested in kind of research that we can do with human, basically things that you could do in a doctor's office, say, to maybe do early detection of Alzheimer's, which there's a lot of up and coming research for. So I'm in the right time for what I'm interested in, which is nice because Alzheimer's research is what everyone is doing right now. But I think learning all of these different tests that I can run with mice, and really learning and respecting the scientific process is going to help me for what I want to do doing research with people. Yeah, obviously different kind of research. I mean, you're not going to throw a human on a rotarod, but
hopefully not. But it sounds like, your time now, you were saying how now is very big for Alzheimer's research, but even in your job right now, the types of work that you do, even with the Alzheimer's mice, let's say, it's just been particularly informative for you and helped shape your trajectory going forward.
Yeah, it really has.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Zoe, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any other kind of parting words for the audience or any other words of advice? You mentioned a lot, so if not, we got a lot of bases covered.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sitting and talking with me. I guess my only words of advice would just be, take advantage of things like this, the career chats. I mean, I wish that I was able to watch something like this when I was going through all of my decision making. But yeah, just not to be intimidated by science, because it's just a really cool, fun field to be in.
Yeah, I think you help show us that, having confidence is key, and sometimes all it takes is just getting that first job just to get you a seat at the table and show you that you're just as good as everyone else. I think your story is really compelling, and a lot of people identify with that.
Thanks.
All right, well, Zoe, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, and we'll sign off.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
That was awesome.